Have you ever been told that you work too much? You might be spending a lot of hours in a week on your creative work and building your freelance business, and it might seem to others like you don't have time to do the things that they want to do with you. It might seem that you're pulling too many all-nighters to get projects out the door and meet deadlines. People, experts of all sorts, talk about work-life balance and how trying to achieve equity between all of the roles you play in your life is something to be desired. It's a goal that everybody needs to achieve because one cannot possibly work too much and still be healthy. One cannot have a healthy lifestyle if all you're doing is working. So there's a lot of expertise and content out there about balancing your work and your personal lives. Well, my years of experience have taught me something, and it's not that work and life are balanced. Work is part of life. So how can you balance the smaller thing with the bigger thing that the smaller thing fits into? So in this program, I'm going to share some thoughts about work-life balance and an alternative approach you might want to consider, which can remove a lot of stress. You're listening to the Freelance Road Trip podcast, and we're located at the intersection of inspired creativity and common business sense. We talk about everything you didn't learn in design school but should have if you want to build a career and a life as an independent creative. And I'm Alvalyn Lundgren. I'm founder of Alvalyn Creative and of Freelance Road Trip, which is an online business school designed to help you shift your freelancing into high gear without stalling out. Here in the Freelance Road Trip podcast, I share proven strategies and practical answers to transform your creative drive into a thriving independent business so that you can accelerate your creative and material growth. And whether you're just starting out or you're in need of a tune-up, if you're a creativepreneur who wants to build a business and life doing what you love because working for someone else doesn't do it for you, this is the place to be. This is episode 125, and I've titled it Up All Night because I have been up all night working on client projects in order to meet a deadline. So people talk a lot about how to achieve balance between what you do professionally and what you do personally. The thing is, you can't really achieve true balance. Your life is already balanced, and that's the thing that people miss, I believe. Your life is a whole, it's a gestalt. And the design principle of gestalt is the idea of wholeness, that everything in a design works together to express the whole thing. So your life is made up of many different parts. It's like any design. You've got type, you've got color, you've got shape, you've got composition and structure. Those all work together to create the whole thing. Within your life, you have the part of your life where you're earning a living, the part of your life where you're enjoying your family, the part of your life where perhaps you're adventuring or studying or exploring. Then there's the sleeping, there's the taking care of yourself physically. There's a bunch of moving parts within the whole thing that is called your life. So it's a Gestalt, which is a German term that loosely translates in English to wholeness. So if you consider the various aspects of what make up your life, you'll have family, you'll have friends, you'll have career, you'll have hobbies, you might have sports, relaxation time, entertainment, and time to be with friends, obviously time to sleep and eat and so forth. And there are seasons where certain things in your life become larger in proportion to other things. For instance, many of my students are studying design in order to make a career change. So they've already had fairly successful careers, but they're just not satisfied. So now they become students to learn design and design thinking, critical practice, the ability to take a project from initial concept to completion, the ability to serve clients eventually. But in order to do that, having only 24 hours in a day, and now they've added studies and design projects on top of their family life and their work life. Certain things have to come off the table in order to accommodate the new pursuit or the new effort. But that's only for a season. Once that course of study is completed, then things shift and change around all over again. When you're a new parent, the greater portion of your time every day is going to be involved in nurturing that child. And then as that child grows, you can back off on certain types of nurture and other things come into play. There are constant proportional shifts going on in your life. When you're starting a business, you're going to spend a lot of time building that business because that's going to be your revenue source. So you have to put time into it. So that means maybe you're not sitting around streaming TV programs for hours on end, or you're not gaming as much, or you're not going out for happy hour with friends so much because you've decided to dedicate that time to building your business. So everything we do in life is part of our life. It's not that your life is 2 or 3 separate things and they all exist side by side. It's actually a complete whole. It's not like, say, a plate where you have a steak next to a baked potato, next to a pile of green beans with some bread on the side. It's more like soup, where everything is blended together, and if you tried to separate the elements out, it wouldn't be that easy. I think that we can make a mistake if we treat it like there has to be symmetry. Like there has to be this exact mathematical precision or equation between the amount of time we spend working and the amount of time we spend not working. We each have 24 hours in a day, no more, no less. Most of us sleep 8 hours, which is a third of that day. Most people will work a third of that day if they work a 9 to 5, and that gives us 8 hours to do the other things that are not work and not sleep. So there's this ideal concept that we divide our life into exact thirds. Well, the problem is there are some times when certain aspects of your life are going to completely take over, and you can't have a third and a third and a third. Maybe it's more like 3/4 and 1/4, or 3/5 and 2/5. As a freelancer, you might have the goal of working 8 hours a day as if you were a W-2 employee with an hour off for lunch somewhere in the middle and 2 15-minute breaks, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And that's the way you're going to work on your business and work in your business. And that's how you're going to serve clients. And that's great, but it doesn't usually work that way, especially when you are working with clients. I found throughout my life that my workday was actually split. So I'd work in the morning, I'd spend time at my kids' softball matches and things like that, and then I'd work again in the evening. So I would work my schedule for client projects and marketing and all my business stuff and my friends in and around her schedule. My days were never divided into exact thirds. So if you find yourself spending more than 8 hours a day on a deadline, and there might be delays in the client getting content to you that you need to work with, or there might be delays elsewhere, or the power might go out, which causes you to rush on the back end of a project to get it done on time. That means you're probably going to work more hours in a day than you expected to. And the stress comes between that expectation, or what you believe is the ideal, and what the actuality is. And then we say, well, I need to balance my day. I need to balance my work and my personal life. I think there's freedom in realizing that there's never perfect precision in life. Life is messy. There's never perfect symmetry. There's always a geometry, but there's never a perfect symmetry to our lives. Life is seasonal. In one season, certain things will dominate and others will kind of retreat. They take less of our notice. And then there's a change that comes, and all of a sudden, something new dominates and takes the majority of your time. And the things that were important one season become less important in another season or two. So the idea of balance can happen, but it is better, I think, to look at it as proportional, an asymmetric balance rather than a symmetric balance. So asymmetry is still balance. We balance the 2/3 with the 1/3. We balance the 3/5 with the 2/5, and so on. So if you can think of designing your life or understanding life as a design, and you have this certain amount of space, this certain height to width to depth ratio, and that's the boundaries of our life. And everything we put inside those boundaries pertains to what we're all about and why we're here and what we enjoy doing. And at certain times, there will be certain things that will dominate and take up the greater proportion of our time and our effort. And then eventually they'll subside and other things will dominate. If we look at balance that way, it tends to relieve the worry about balancing because it's always balanced. It's just the proportion within the balance ratio shifts. We may not like the fact that it's not symmetric, but it's still balanced. In design, there are 5 different types of balance. There's symmetry, which is very precise, very exact. Everything is equally proportioned. There's approximate symmetry, which is variations. It actually adds interest to the symmetry because straight symmetry, straight bilateral symmetry, can be pretty darn boring. Then there's asymmetry, which is that proportional balance. We have the whole thing. We divide the space not directly in half or in direct quarters, but it might be a 2/3, 1/3. It might be 5/8 to 3/8. Asymmetry is much more dynamic and even exciting. Then there's crystallographic balance, which is all over balance. It's like a repeat pattern. And sometimes life feels like everything, you've got a lot of little things going on all at the same time, and they're all each demanding your attention. And then the other balance is radial. And in radial balance, there is a center intersection of everything, and everything stems from that in a variety of directions. But if you can understand that life is a whole thing and not various compartments sitting side by side, and that what you do over here in this part of your life will affect what you do over there in that part of your life. In other words, if you're spending more time building your business, you will have less time for another activity, and that's okay. And sometimes as freelance creatives, we get a deadline which is 2 weeks down the road. So we have to get this done and we have to push and really focus on the project. And you realize you're going to spend 12 to 14 hours a day for the next 2 weeks getting this thing accomplished and out the door for the client. That's going to be the majority of your time for those 2 weeks. But then, after it's out the door, everything shifts into a different state and a different proportionality. That's one of the things that's exciting about owning your own time, because you get to choose how you're going to invest your time. It's never going to be the same project to project, week to week, day to day. One day is not going to be exactly the same as the previous day. As an independent, you're in control of your time, how you earn your income, where you work, the kind of business you run, the kind of projects you accept, the kind of clients you serve. You're entirely in control of how you apportion your life. One of the advantages of freelancing is that you do own your time. You're not at anybody else's beck and call necessarily. You have less interruptions during the day. And that means you have more margin and can be more flexible to handle things that are urgent and important. There are stresses that come with being independent. There's a lot of risk that comes with being independent, because you're totally dependent upon yourself and you are solely responsible for what you do and for the outcomes of your efforts and your life. There's more stress in going to work for somebody else, being their employee, because they're making demands on you. And sometimes they will require not just your time, but overtime. Your concern is to help them be successful. And there's a kind of culture shock every time you come home after a day at the office, so to speak, because you're in that work culture, in that environment, and then you leave and you come into your own environment. And sometimes you bring that work environment with you into your own, your home environment. There's different types of stress that go on when you're working for somebody than when you're freelancing. When you work for yourself, you're a lot more agile. You can quickly shift gears, and you can offload certain responsibilities so that you can focus on what you need to for that season. You've heard people say, and you've probably experienced this too, that Because you work for yourself by choice and you enjoy what you're doing, it's not really work. It doesn't feel like work. So it's very easy to slip into working 12, 14, 16 hours a day on your creative work and building your business. I recall quite a number of years ago, I was with a friend and talking with him about a certain client and a certain project. And he was actually critical of me. Basically, he said, well, you're always working. You're constantly working. And in a way, that was true. When I'm not officially at work, I very often think about the projects that I'm working on. And I think about my clients, or I'm thinking about design, or I'm thinking about my students. But in a way, it wasn't true. And at that moment, I remember kind of looking over at him and I said, well, I'm spending time with you right now, right? So I'm not working now, am I? I've chosen to spend time with you, and that's my choice. That shifted the conversation a little bit. But when people are employed, they don't necessarily understand how freelancers manage their time. They don't understand the freelance life or the freelance experience because it's not within their realm of experience, so they have no clue. What looks like always working to them is actually very often just nurturing that creative drive. The whole idea of being a workaholic, somebody who's actually addicted to work, I guess is what that means, and that being a bad thing, it's kind of hard to say that about somebody who absolutely loves what they do and enjoys spending a greater portion of time on it than somebody else would. If you're like me, you love the creative work, you love building the business, which has its own creativity involved. You love the concepting and the creative process, and you love the design development. Maybe you create content and you really enjoy those processes and sharing your thoughts and ideas and your artwork with the world in that way. And you might spend 16 to 20 hours a day doing all those things, but you're in the zone. It's what you do. It's what you love to do. That doesn't mean you're addicted to it. Calling somebody a workaholic implies that there's something wrong with them being productive. One of the freedoms, one of the joys that comes with being my own boss, so to speak, being my own person, is that I can love all aspects of my life. I'm not living for the weekend. Every single day of the week, Monday through Sunday, is a day to enjoy. It's a new day. It's equally valid. I don't have the sense that I'm wasting my time. I don't have any sense of, gee, I can't wait to get home so that I can do what I want to do, because I'm already doing what I want to do. And that in itself relieves stress. And if I do what I want to do 12 hours a day rather than 8 hours a day, because I'm not punching a time clock, there's no pressure. I just get it done. And you're probably the same way. When you're a freelancer, there's a certain amount of discipline that is absolutely necessary that a lot of employed people don't have. Freelancers need to be self-determined, self-directed, and self-reliant. I don't have a manager to go to figure out what to do. I have to do that on my own. And then I have to go do it. And then I make sure it's done well and make sure it's manifested properly. If I'm working for an employer, I can blame something on a team member or I can blame it on the boss or the president of the company. When a person works for themselves, they have nobody to blame but themselves. It's all on them. And there's stress in that, but there's also great relief. You don't have to conform to somebody else's way of doing things, especially if it doesn't fit what you do or how you do it. One aspect of my ability to serve my clients well is the fact that my life is an integrated whole. It's proportionally balanced. I don't try to get an equal 50-50 ratio of career versus personal time. That benefits my clients and it benefits me because it makes things easy. For many of us creatives, everything we see, everything we do relates to inspiration or is fascinating because of how it's designed. We see the world differently. I tend to see everything in design terms, and I tend to think that way because design is a very logical discipline. It's highly creative, but it's also highly logical. Things have to make sense. Things have to be in order when you're a designer. So I can go to the grocery store and be inspired by what I see in the grocery store, both in terms of how things are laid out, the paths of travel, the various departments in the grocery store. And I can also be fascinated by packaging and product design and color and texture and form and so forth. And because I'm a designer, I'm going to be seeing these things. So I'm at the grocery store, but I'm still thinking as a designer. Design is my profession. Design is how I make my living. Design is my work. It doesn't turn off simply because I'm not working on a client project. So it's always going to be in my conversation. It's always going to be in front of me. So work-life balance isn't necessarily a thing that you can achieve. And if that's the focus of what you're trying to do, you're probably missing a lot. Try to think of it in terms of the gestalt. Life is a whole thing. It's integrated. You can't compartmentalize it. You can't say that there's this one part over here and it's walled off from everything else, because it's part of your life. It's part of your purview. It's part of your role and responsibility. It's part of your sphere of influence. So if you look at life as a whole thing made up of various parts that shift season to season and sometimes even day to day, you don't have to worry about balancing symmetrically. You can set that stress aside. You can throw it off of you and never pick it up again. And it makes things a lot easier because you're actually giving yourself permission to breathe and do the things that you need to do as you need to do them without having to consider, I can only work this many hours and then I have to stop or I'm going to be unhealthy. The 40-hour work week is an arbitrary thing. And there's a lot of people in a lot of professions who do not work 40-hour work weeks. And they live fully integrated, satisfying, fulfilling lives. And they have flexibility when seasons change. And they're not worried about the change of seasons because they know things will work out and settle down. And they're not wasting time. They're not wasting their effort. That's one of the things I really enjoy about being an independent creative. And I hope you do too. So if you have questions or want to talk, why not book a 1-hour coaching session? Go to freelanceroadtrip.com/coaching. Thanks for joining me. This is the Freelance Road Trip Podcast, the intersection of inspired creativity and common business sense to help you accelerate your freelance business. It's where you get the street smarts they don't teach you in design school. You'll find the show notes at freelanceroadtrip.com/show 125. Go to freelanceroadtrip.com/newsletter to get professional tips and industry insights parked in your inbox a couple times a month. You can follow me on Instagram at Freelance Road Trip and also at Alvalin Creative, and on X, formerly Twitter, at Freelance Trip. And be sure to check out our YouTube channel. May you prosper in all things and be in health as your soul prospers. And I'll see you on the road.